Do you ever find yourself lying awake at night, obsessively replaying a casual conversation in your head, analyzing every single word you said, just to make absolutely sure you did not accidentally offend someone? Perhaps you frequently catch yourself saying yes to favors, extra work, or social invitations that you desperately want to decline, simply because the mere thought of disappointing a colleague or a friend feels emotionally unbearable. In our modern era of constant digital connection and carefully curated social media feeds, we live our daily lives under the heavy, invisible gaze of others. We painstakingly curate our outfits, meticulously plan our career trajectories, and even alter our major life milestones to perfectly align with the unspoken expectations of our parents, our peers, and our competitive society. Is profoundly exhausting. We are effectively running a relentless, lifelong marathon where the finish line keeps moving, and the judges are people who are too busy with their own lives to truly notice us. And this desperate, ongoing pursuit of universal approval is a silent epidemic that quietly drains our mental energy and leaves us feeling strangely empty inside, even when we supposedly do everything right. From the moment we enter the school system, we have been rigorously conditioned to believe that being universally liked by everyone is the ultimate proof of our intrinsic worth. Because of this deep-rooted conditioning, we actively fear conflict, we dread the slightest hint of criticism, and we instinctively bend our personalities out of shape just to fit comfortably into the arbitrary molds created by other people's preferences. What if this desperate, exhausting need for constant recognition is the exact poison that is making you miserable? What if the true key to genuine, lasting happiness is not found in gathering the applause of the crowd, but rather in bravely accepting the disapproval of others? Today, we are going to deeply explore a radical, life-changing philosophical framework that turns everything you thought you knew about human relationships and personal freedom completely upside down. To properly understand this profound psychological shift, we must travel back to the early 20th century and examine the brilliant minds of the great pioneers of modern psychology. While Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung are almost universally recognized as the ultimate household names when we casually talk about psychoanalysis, there is a third, equally masterful intellectual giant who stood right beside them: the Austrian medical doctor and psychotherapist Alfred Adler. Unlike Freud, who firmly believed that our present miseries and hidden neuroses are strictly determined by the dark, unchangeable traumas of our past, a widely accepted deterministic concept known in psychology as etiology, Adler proposed a radically different and decidedly optimistic theory called teleology. Adlerian psychology boldly argues that we are not helpless, passive victims who are constantly pushed around by the heavy ghosts of our past traumas. Instead, he proposed that we are active, free agents who are consciously or casually pulled forward by our present goals and hidden psychological motives. For instance, Adler would argue that a young person who shuts themselves in their room and refuses to go to work is not doing so simply because they were severely bullied or traumatized as a child. Rather, they have a present, unconscious goal of avoiding the potential pain of interacting with others in the outside world, and the trauma is merely being used as a convenient, socially acceptable excuse to achieve their current goal of safe isolation. And this empowering, responsibility-driven philosophy remained somewhat confined to academic texts and clinical circles in the West for many decades. However, it was brilliantly resurrected and beautifully translated for the modern era through the phenomenal philosophical bestseller, The Courage to be Disliked, elegantly written by Japanese authors Ichiro Kishimi and Fumite Koga. This uniquely structured book, which takes the engaging form of a classic Socratic dialogue between a deeply cynical, unhappy youth and an insightful, patient philosopher, struck a massive cultural chord globally. It sold millions of copies and quietly sparked a mental revolution in how ordinary people view their daily unhappiness. It resonated so deeply across so many different cultures because it accurately diagnosed a universal modern sickness: the crippling, paralyzing anxiety of interpersonal relationships in a hyper-competitive, visually driven society. Adler's psychology is fundamentally, at its very core, a psychology of raw human courage. It does not offer a sweet, comforting magic pill to magically erase your past mistakes, nor does it provide a secret manipulative formula to automatically alter other people's annoying behaviors. Instead, it demands that you take absolute, unflinching responsibility for your own life choices right here, right now, completely independent of the environment you grew up in. It is a harsh but profoundly necessary conceptual medicine for anyone who feels suffocated by the heavy, invisible chains of societal expectations. Absolute philosophical cornerstone of the courage to be disliked, and perhaps Alfred Adler's most practically liberating intellectual contribution to modern living, is the brilliant psychological concept known as the separation of tasks. To easily grasp this life-altering idea, consider a very common, everyday household scenario. A worried parent constantly nagging their teenager to study hard, do their homework, and get good grades. In conventional psychology and modern parenting, this nagging is usually seen as a very normal, necessary expression of parental love and responsible guidance. However, Adler brutally and coldly dissects this interaction. He asks a simple but piercing question: whose task is this ultimately? When the child stubbornly refuses to open a book, who is the one who will eventually face the direct, real-world consequences of failing the university exam or struggling to find a decent job? It is the child alone, not the parent. Therefore, studying is exclusively and definitively the child's life task. When a parent aggressively intervenes and forces the child to study against their will, they are improperly and violently intruding on the child's personal task. This well-intentioned but misguided intrusion inevitably creates immense friction, bitter resentment, and a total breakdown in the family relationship. Adler boldly asserts that virtually all interpersonal relationship problems in our lives, from workplace conflicts to marital disputes, are caused by either us improperly intruding on other people's tasks, or by us weakly allowing other people to improperly intrude on our own tasks in and now. Let us directly extrapolate this profound conceptual framework to your own adult life, specifically focusing on the paralyzing fear of what your peers think of you. When you make a significant, unconventional life choice, whether it is bravely quitting a high-paying prestige job to pursue a risky art career, ending a socially acceptable but personally unhappy relationship, or simply declining an invitation to a party you do not want to attend, some people will inevitably judge you, secretly dislike you, or openly criticize your decision. Here is the magnificent, mind-blowing realization provided by the strict separation of tasks. Evaluating your personal choices and feeling a negative emotion about your actions is entirely their task, not yours. You have absolutely zero control over how someone else's complex mind processes and judges your independent action. If a senior colleague secretly resents you because you left the office at PM to focus on your family, that resentment is entirely their emotional burden to carry, a valid reflection of your objective professional worth. Your only genuine, moral task in this vast universe is to live your own life authentically, guided by your own internal ethical compass, without willfully harming the rights of others. Trying to constantly manipulate, manage, or control another person's emotional reaction to your existence is not only an impossible fool's errand, but is also an arrogant, boundary-crossing intrusion into their personal life task. The defining moment you actively choose to stop carrying the heavy, useless luggage of other people's opinions, a tremendous, almost physical weight is immediately lifted from your tired shoulders. You finally realize that being disliked by someone is simply mathematical, undeniable proof that you are finally exercising your ultimate freedom to live according to your own principles. So, how do we practically bridge the massive, intimidating gap between intellectually understanding Adler's philosophy and actually applying it in the complex, messy reality of our daily lives? The transition begins with a very specific, deliberate mental exercise that you can start practicing tomorrow morning. Whenever you find yourself hesitating to make a decision because you are intensely worried what someone else might think, say, or assume, physically close your eyes and mentally visualize a thick, unbreakable glass wall descending between you and that other person. On your side of this clear glass wall is your difficult decision, your personal ethical values, and your highly finite time on this earth. On their side of the glass wall is their subjective reaction, their personal judgment, and their own healed emotional baggage. You must consciously articulate to yourself, I am actively choosing to do X because it aligns with my life goals. They choose to react to my choice is entirely on their side of the glass wall, and I absolutely refuse to cross over to manage it. For instance, if you are invited to a mandatory weekend social gathering that you know will leave you mentally drained and exhausted, but you initially consider going just to avoid being labeled as antisocial by your colleagues, apply the glass wall technique, respectfully but firmly decline the invitation. If the host becomes offended or actively gossips about your absence on Monday morning, do not rush to frantically apologize or nervously over-explain yourself. Observe their negative reaction from your safe side of the glass, acknowledge that their disappointment belongs exclusively to them, and peacefully proceed to spend your weekend reading a book and recharging your own vital energy. And another deeply vital action plan, derived directly from Adlerian psychology, is completely and radically redefining your internal definition of genuine contribution. From a very young age, many of us have been systematically taught that to be valuable, we must be explicitly praised, awarded, and formally recognized by authority figures, a tough boss, a strict parent, or thousands of anonymous followers on the internet. Adler vigorously tears down this exhausting, dependency-driven framework. He introduced the beautiful concept of contribution to others as a purely internal, self-contained feeling of worth. You do not actually need someone to visibly pat you on the back and say good job to know in your heart that you have helped. If you quietly clean up the shared office kitchen when no one is looking, or if you simply sit and listen to a friend in distress without offering unsolicited advice, the very act of contributing should instantly fill your own psychological cup, regardless of whether you ever receive a formal thank you note. By decisively detaching your core sense of self-worth from external, unpredictable validation, and anchoring it instead to your own internal, steady compass of contribution, you immediately and permanently strip other people of the power to dictate your happiness. You stop performing your daily life like an anxious actor desperately seeking applause on a crowded stage, and you start living it internally, securely anchored in a quiet, unshakable confidence that no one in the world can ever take away from you. In the end, the courage to be disliked is not a cynical sociopathic manual teaching us to be arrogant, selfish, or deliberately abrasive toward the people around us. Quite the opposite is profoundly true. It is a beautifully ethical, deeply compassionate roadmap for building a life of authentic, sustainable harmony, which paradoxically can only be achieved when we completely stop trying to control, manipulate, and police each other's emotions. When you finally summon the incredible, terrifying courage to be disliked, you are not declaring a hostile war on the world. You are simply declaring a long overdue, peaceful truce with yourself. You are gently but firmly returning the heavy emotional baggage, the judgments, the unspoken demands that never truly belonged to you in the first place, putting it right back into the hands of its rightful owners. The ultimate freedom that Alfred Adler spoke of over a century ago is not a chaotic, boundaryless existence where you step on others to get ahead, but rather the quiet, profound peace of mind that comes from knowing exactly where your personal responsibilities end and where the rest of the universe begins. And as you prepare to end your long day and lay your head quietly on your pillow tonight, I invite you to deeply reflect on the invisible, suffocating chains you might have unknowingly placed upon yourself over the past several years. Ask yourself with brutal, unflinching honesty in the dark, whose life have I really been living today? Have I been meticulously and intentionally steering my own ship toward my own destination? Or have I been anxiously and constantly adjusting my sails just to catch the unpredictable winds of other people's fleeting opinions? It takes immense, sometimes terrifying courage to willingly step out of the comforting, warm blanket of universal societal approval, but outside that remarkably small, restrictive circle lies the vast, beautiful, infinite expanse of your one and only authentic life. If this quiet intellectual journey through the brilliant mind of Alfred Adler has struck a deep chord within you today and offered you a moment of sudden clarity, please hit the subscribe button to join us here at Book Dream. We are passionately dedicated to bringing you these profound, life-altering insights every single week. Before you drift off to sleep, we would love to hear from you. What is one specific societal expectation or daily peer pressure that you are choosing to boldly let go of starting tomorrow morning? Share your courageous decision in the comments below, and let us actively support each other in reclaiming our mental freedom. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible, valuable, finite time with us today. May you wake up tomorrow morning with a significantly lighter heart, the quiet, unshakable strength to dislike, and the ultimate freedom to truly be yourself. Rest well.